Good morning. Today's daf is Kiddushin daf Kaf Daled. We are at the very last line. What?
Any special woman?
Any special women? Absolutely. We will definitely. No, well, we're talking about slaves at the moment, so less than women. But we'll have a lot of special stuff over the course of today. So let's take a look. So,
How was your vacation?
oh, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for asking. We'll talk about it after the class. Okay. All right, so here we go. So we're going to share my screen and we can get started. So yes, on Monday, we learned a Mishnah that detailed how a non-Jewish slave is acquired and set free. And the Mishnah included the following debate. Rabbi Meir said, only money provided by someone other than the slave can be used to purchase the slave's freedom. Meaning, the slave can't. If the slave holds the money, then it's going to be treated as if the owner got the money already. And so, even if that money came from a third party, there's nothing to be done about it. And then the Chachamim said, no, the slave can use the money that's in his hands as long as that money came from somebody else, because if that money came from somebody else, it didn't belong to him. It wasn't given to him for the purposes of giving it to the master. And so he's not on some level an agent of the master. The master doesn't own the money. And so the money can be given from the slave to the master. Now, we had three discussions about what this debate could potentially be. The first one was, well, maybe we're talking about a situation where men and women, slaves and women who are married, just don't have the ability to make an acquisition, or maybe they do have the ability to make an acquisition without their husband if they were to so choose. And Rebbe Meir would say there's no ability, and the rabbis would say that there is ability. And so we said, but that can't be. That's not going to be the answer. So we're going to give two other interpretations. Interpretation number two was, is a conditional gift effective? So if I say to you, if I say to the slave, here is $100, on the condition that it does not go to your master, does that slave actually get that $100? Or do we say that because I said, here is $100, and only afterwards say, on the condition that it did not go to your master, it's tough luck. Once I've given him the $100, it's all going to the master. And so that's the debate between Rebbe Meir and the rabbis. Rebbe Meir says it all goes to the master anyway, and the rabbis say no, it doesn't go to the master. The slave gets it. And Rebbe Lazar said it's not even that situation. That even in that situation, we would say that the money would all go to the master. It's only in the following situation where the rabbis would say the money doesn't go to the master. And that is, if I tell the slave, here is $100 in order to free you, then the slave never takes ownership of it according to the rabbis, and the conditions effective. Whereas Rebbe Lazar says, whereas Rebbe Meir says in the Mishnah, and because he's disagreeing with them, that no, such a condition is not effective. All right, so now that we had those three situations, we're going to now show, again, the bottom line is that for Rebbe Meir, when money is put into the hand of the slave, it's effectively already the owner's. Whereas for the Chachamim, money is put into the hand of the slave, and it's not the owner's. It's the slave has the ability. It may need some kind of condition associated with it, but it doesn't belong to the owner. Now, the same rules that apply to slaves apply to wives, in not the every rule, but in connection with their ability to make acquisitions. We're going to assume at the moment that the same rules apply. And so now, as we pick up on the bottom line, we're going to see, again, Rebbe Meir seems to say that the money can't go to the slaves. The rabbis say the money does go to the slave. And now we're going to note a contradiction as we pick up with the second word on the last line of 23b of Kaf Gimel Bet. So Virami, we have a contradiction. The Rabbi Meir ad the Rabbi Meir, for Rabbi Meir on Rabbi Meir. Virami the Rabbanan ad the Rabbanan. And we've got another contradiction where the rabbis seem to contradict themselves. Because again, Rabbi Meir says the money can't cannot go to the slave, and the rabbis say it can. And now we're going to see somewhere where it seems that they say the exact opposite. Tanya, we've got a Bryce as we turn to Kavdalat and Madala. Ein isha poda maser sheni below chomish. A wife is not allowed to redeem Meiser Sheni without adding a fifth. As a reminder, when Meiser Sheni is the tithe that you take all of the produce, 1/10 of your produce that's left over after you've taken all the other tithes, you take up to Yerushalayim to eat in Yerushalayim. However, sometimes taking a lot of food to Yerushalayim is a big pain. And so as a result, because you got, bushels and bushels. And so how do you deal with it? So what you do if you're farther away is you get it all redeemed and you redeem it onto money. And now you can take the money. Money's a lot more easily to transportable. And so as a result, but if you redeem it yourself, you need to add a fifth. And our assumption right now, if we take, so Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer Mishum Rabbi Meir, Isha Po Demaser Sheni Below Chomish. And the second opinion so we had the first opinion, the Tanakama, is that a woman must add a fifth. She's not allowed to redeem without adding a fifth. So put in other words, she has to, eliminating the double negative, she has to add a fifth. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, in the name of Rabbi Meir, again, Rabbi Meir, who's in our Mishnah, in the name of Rabbi Meir, says that the woman does not add a fifth. She can redeem without adding a fifth. And what do we think we're talking about? So take a look at the first two Rashis. Kazalka daitach. I would have thought that, again, Ein Isha Po Demaser Sheni, Kazalka daitach b'Meiser Sheni Shehu, Nisadei Ba'ala. That we're talking about the Meiser Sheni that is from the field of her owner, of her husband, Shehi Kiba'ala, and she is like the master, she is like her husband, the Karina Leimi Maasro. And so it's called as if she's redeeming her own Meiser, as we will explain in a moment. And so the point is that according to the Tanakama, she is like her husband, and when she redeems the Meiser Sheni, she needs to add a fifth. And that, okay, Isha podeh below chomish delavdi dahu, and we're going to say that it's not as if it's hers. The ain mosivin chomish al pidyon. So the money that she has is not considered, is not considered something that can add a fifth to it. So maestros vehektoshos ela baalim. Right, that you don't need to. The only people who add a fifth are the owners themselves, and here she, clearly according to Rebbe Meir, is not considered the owner. So Heichidami, what's the situation? So if we say that everything belongs to the husband, meaning that the woman is using her husband's money and she's using it to redeem her husband's produce, well, of course, she's going to add a fifth. She is the messenger of her husband. And so why would there ever be anyone who says that you don't have to add a fifth? So that cannot be what we're talking about. So rather, what is the case that we're talking about? Or maybe you want to say it's her money and his meiser. That doesn't work either, because Ish Amarachmana below Isha. So there are two ways of understanding this line, that the man is said. So first, just note that the pasuk is Vayikra Parak Zion pasuk Lamed Aleph, where it says in connection with the redemption of Meiser Sheni that the man does the redemption and adds a fifth, not a woman. Now the point is that the bottom line is, according to Rashi, take a look at the Rashi third line down. Ish Amarachmana below Isha. Ish Mima'asro Amar Rachmana below Isha Mima'aser Bala. That when it says Ish, it means a man or the husband, and not a woman who is redeeming her husband's meiser. The Isha Ka'acher Damya. And what it's teaching us is that the wife is considered like a third party. Now Tosfos has a problem with that, and so says, no, I don't think that's the case. And indeed, if we take a look in the second line of Tosfos, V'kashul Rabbeinu Tam, Delo hayalo lahazkir ish v'isha klal ella habalei l'meimar mima'asro. That it should have just said, it shouldn't have said ish and isha. It should have said mima'asro to emphasize the meiser. Amar Rachmana v'lo mima'asar chavero. And not from the meiser of your friend. And so the point is that if we wanted to emphasize this fact that a woman can redeem her husband's meiser without having to add a chomish, the Torah would have told it in a different manner. And therefore, v'nira l'Rabbeinu Tam, Jagaras ela bezuzei dida u'ma'asar dida. But rather, Tosfos actually rereads the Gemara. Again, the Gemara said her money and his meiser. But Tosfos, Rabbeinu Tam is saying, no, it should say her money and her meiser. And this is what it's teaching, a radical idea. Ish amarachmana, that actually it says in the Torah, man, the Mosif Chomish, only a man will add a fifth when he redeems his own meiser. Al Masro. Below Isha, afilu bezuze dida, even if she's using her own money, a woman who's redeeming her own meiser will not actually have to add a fifth. Even if she is a divorcee, I mean, even if she's not married, this is the rule that would apply.
The adding a fifth, what's the biblical reason for the fifth?
Excellent question. So let's I think you can explore it yourself and you'll figure it out yourself, right?
Would that be bad news?
No, this is good news for her. Good news that she doesn't have to add a fifth. Let's go over it. So if I tell you that, you know what, you donated this table to the Beit HaMikdash, and so now it's time to redeem it. And I say to you, okay, listen, rather than sell it in the open marketplace, you tell me what it's worth. And you give me the money that you think it's worth, and we'll give that money to the Beit HaMikdash. You think it's worth about $75? You're probably right. So do you think that you would say a higher number than the marketplace or a lower number than a lower number than the marketplace? Exactly. So now why do you think we add a fifth? Because it's exactly because we want to make sure that we're getting the right number. So there you go. So now so we have this debate between Tosfos and Rashi, but the bottom line is that we have not yet figured out what the case in this price is talking about, because it can't be talking about the husband's money and the husband's meiser, and it can't be talking about her money and, according to Rashi, the husband's meiser, or her money and her meiser, according to Tosfos. So elalav ki hai gavna. What's the story? It must be a third party's money. To akne la achar mana. Somebody else gave her the money. V'amar la almanash shetifti bo es hameiser, and she gave it, and the person gave it to her on the condition that she use it to redeem her husband's meiser. So now the question is the money hers, and therefore she is a third party redeeming the meiser, or is the money his, and we say it's tough luck, right? It's tough luck that she needs to, and we treat it as if it's his money and he should be redeeming. And yet, what do we say? The problem is the Tanna Kama is the one who says that she gets, that we treat it as if it's his money. But the Tanna Kama is the rabbis, and the rabbis are the one who say if you put the money into a slave's hand, we don't treat it as if it were the master's. And on the other hand, Rabbi Meir, he's the one who's in this situation is saying you don't have to add a fifth. So as a result, he's the one who's saying that it's as if it's her money. And so as a result, but he's also the one who says that if you put the money in the hand of the slave, it always goes to the master. So we seem to have a contradiction. And so as a result, we need to resolve the contradiction. And Abaye gives us the first and very easiest way to resolve the contradiction. So the ibcha shemanalu, and so just to close out the question, the ibcha shemanalu, we learn the exact opposite about these issues. They seem to have the opposite opinions. So Amar Abaye Epoch. All right. So it turns out that brisa we must have gotten confused, and we just got the opinion switched. So switch the opinions. Rava Amar La'olam Loe table. Rava says, no, it's not a mix-up. It's not a contradiction. Rather, we need to distinguish the case that we're talking about. And here's the case that we're talking about. V'hacha b'meiser da'asim and be'nasha askinan. We're talking about meiser that came from the house of her father. And so Rashi helps us out. Da'asim and be'nasha. They came from the house of her father. Shemei Saviha. Her father passed away, unfortunately. V'hayalo Meiser Sheni, and he owned Meiser Sheni. V'yarashta, and she inherited it. Im shar nechasim, with everything else. V'yerusha haba la la'achar mikan, and anything she inherits after the marriage. So nichse malog, it's considered nichse malog. So what are nichse malog? We got to remind ourselves. Nichse malog are produce that the husband has the right to the profits, but the underlying item she still owns. Now, if the underlying item goes up in value, she gets it. If the underlying item goes down in value, she loses it. It's not nechse tzon barza, where the husband effectively guarantees the value. So nechse malog. So what do you do with something? So now, but she didn't inherit land. She inherited these fruit. So v'yilkach bahem karka. So you take the money that they're worth and you buy land with it. V'hu ochel peiros, and then he can eat the fruit from that land, and she will get the benefit of the appreciation of real estate values. Okay, so that's what's supposed to happen. So now, why does that resolve the issue? Well, we have the following debate. Okay, so we've got now the case, right? The case is, hold on just a second. We've got the necessary case. So Rebbe Meir l'taimei the Amar Meister Mamon Hektashu. So we have to recognize that there's a machlokus between the Rebbe Meir and the rabbis in connection with Meiser Sheni. Rebbe Meir says that the money actually doesn't belong. Meiser Sheni, again, is the money is the produce that you take up to Yerushalayim. It doesn't belong to you. It actually belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. It belongs to it's sanctified, but we're going to let you eat it in Yerushalayim. So it's sort of like sanctified with a qualification. But the bottom line is we're not going to consider it yours. We're going to consider it not your property. So v'kani leibal, and so as a result, when she inherits it, if she doesn't get it really, and therefore the husband gets it, it's sort of like an ether out there. She just has the right to eat it there. So she inherits that right, and that right is not a property, and as a result is not something that automatically goes to the husband. So it's not a traditional inheritance. However, v'rabbanan, but the rabbis say l'taimaihu, according to their reasoning, to amri mamon hedyotu. It is public money. It is non-hektish money. It is not sanctified money. It's ordinary property. And so v'kani laba, and so her husband does get effectively make an acquisition of it, and hilkach shlichusa de ba'al ka'avda. And so as a result, when she redeems it, right, if the husband has given her money in order to redeem it, so she's redeeming it with her husband's property and her husband's money. And so now what do we have? According to Rebbe Meir, she is redeeming it with her husband's money, but it doesn't belong to her husband. So as a result, she doesn't have to add a fifth. On the other hand, when according to the rabbis who consider it a real inheritance, it does belong to the husband. And so when she redeems it with the husband's money, she does have to add a fifth. And so we have solved the problem, and therefore we are ready to move on. So again,
So I have a question.
Please go ahead.
So we may have solved the problem in this sugya, but there are many other divrei chazal that indicate that Meister Sheni is absolutely not chulin.
Is absolutely not chulin. So the fact that it's not chulin, the debate that we're focused on here is not on whether it's chulin or not, but on the nature of the inheritance associated with it. So according to Rebbe Meir, it's not inheritable property, and according to whereas according to the rabbis, according to Rabbanan, it is inheritable property. So that's the focus of the debate, rather than on. Although we will see there, Rashi cites us, I think, to later on. Is that right? I think we will see. Yes. If we take a look at Meir l'taimei, the Amr l'kaman, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. Meir l'taimei, the Amr l'kaman perak beis Meiser Maman Gavoahu, that the Meiser Sheni specifically is considered sort of sanctified money. It's considered hektish. So Mishulchan Gavoahu, and you're eating it from the table of Hashem. Ahu. Hilkach Eno Kishar Nechasim, and therefore it's not treated like other property with respect to inheritance. Lemakne Baal Kanta de Tikun Rabbanan, in order to enable the husband to acquire it through the rabbinic decree of Peros Labal, that the fruit of the inheritance goes to the husband. And Hilkach Lo Zachibe, therefore he has no rights in it. And when she redeems it, Bezuze Deba, with the money of the husband, Lav Ma'asrohu, it doesn't belong to him. And so says Bezuze Dechad, Umaiser Dechad. So as a result, it's Meiser that belongs to one and money that belongs to another. And as a result, we're going to say you don't have to add a chomish. So it's only with respect to that inheritance aspect. You're absolutely right that in other contexts, we will see that there are obviously holy aspects associated with Meiser Sheni. Okay. I hope that answers your question sufficiently.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, great. Okay, so now our Mishnah mentioned one or two ways.
There's a whole sector devoted to this in Yerushalmi.
Okay. Yes. So, all right. So our Mishnah mentioned two ways that a slave goes free. The way number one is with money, and way number two was with a contract. But we didn't mention two other ways that are literally written in the Torah. And so now we're going to raise them, and Tosas will make an important point that will explain why it wasn't mentioned in our Mishnah. So Tana, we have a brisa, Yotze b'shein v'ayin, if you knock out a slave's eye or a slave's tooth or slave's eye, v'rashi averim, or some other end of a limb, she'ein and chosrin, where it does not grow back, so then that's when a yotze, the slave will go out, slave goes free. So bishlam ashain. So now in second. So again, so what are we talking about? So let's take, and what are these Rashi Avarim? So let's take a look. First, we'll do Rashi Avarim, second to line in the wide lines of Rashi. And I'll just do the Rashi at the beginning of that line. Tana Yotze b'shein v'ayin. Amasdizin meaning it's a commentary on our Mishnah that these are additional methods of going out. So Rashi Avarim, the tips of limbs. Kaf Dalad Haim, there are 24 b'shenuyim eitzel negaim, and we learn them in connection with the negaim, with the in Mishnah Negaim, which deals with tzarat, and you can see here it says Parak Vav Mishnah Vav Umaisi Luhu Lakam and Bishmaisin, and we're going to just deal with them in detail. We're going to list them. It looks like tomorrow on Daf Kaf Hey Amud Aleph. So and Tosfos points out the following: Tana Yotze b'shein v'ayin, the Tana Didan, our Tana, the author of our Mishnah, Delo Tana Lahu, who didn't learn these items, didn't teach these items. Mishum desaver de tzarach get shechor. He holds that even though you've knocked out your slave's tooth or you've knocked out your slave's eye, and so they are deserving to go free, as it says in the Torah explicitly, you still need to give a get shechor, a emancipation document. And so as a result, we're going to discuss that in a moment. But let's go through now and understand the limud as to how we know about each of these items. So bishlam ashain va'ayin ksivi. Well, when it comes to the teeth and to a tooth or an eye, well, it's written in the Torah, so we don't really need to go any further. Ela Rashi Avarim Minalan. How do I know that we should read the eye and the tooth broadly in the Torah? So Dumya Deshain V'ayin, because it's comparable. What it means is that it's comparable to a tooth and an eye. Ma'ashein V'ayin Mumin Shebegalui V'einin Chosrin, just as the loss of a tooth or an eye causes somebody to have a something that's obvious, you can see it, that they are you can see those conditions easily, and they don't regenerate. So akol mumin shebegali ve'ein chosrin. Similarly, anything else that is a revealed kind of blemish, and it does not return. Ve'ema nehavi shein va'ayin kishnei ksuvim abayin ke'echad. Well, 1 second. V'chol shnei ksuvim abayin ke'echad ein melamdin. Well, we have a general principle that when you have two verses that teach us a similar law, then you do not learn from those two a general principle. Rather, the fact that the Torah would repeat a specific law tells us that it is only in that situation that that law applies. So why don't we say that in this case? Well, because we actually do need both of them to be taught. And why is that? Because of Rahman Hashem, because if the Torah only taught us that if you knock out a tooth, then the slave goes free, but we didn't talk about the other case. So Hava Amina, Afilu Shein Dechalab. As we turn to Kavdal and I'm a bed, I might have thought that it's talking about even the milk tooth. And what in the world is a milk tooth? Well, it's exactly what you probably guessed it would be. Shein Dechalab, Shein Shiyanak Ba. It's the tooth that a baby nurses with, that will eventually fall out and get changed. Kagon be'eved katan. So if we're talking about a minor child who's a slave, and you knock that child's tooth out, that child's tooth, because it will regrow, it will not be considered. The point is that I might have thought that they should go free. So that's why Kasav Rahmana Ayin. That's why the Torah also taught us about an eye, because what it's telling us is that it must not be able to regenerate. So unlike a baby tooth, it can't regenerate. The ikas of Rahmana ayin, and if the Torah had just written an eye, hava mina ma ayin shnibra imo, akol shnibra imo. I would have thought that just as an eye you're born with, so too the things that if they're knocked out are going to be a problem is only things that you're born with, which would not include teeth. So you do need to teach about Shein Lo, but I would not cause the teeth to be in this law. And so tzricha, so therefore we need to teach both an eye and a tooth. Okay, so now that we've confirmed that we don't have Shnei Ksuvim Abayim Ke'echad, so the next question is, do we say ve'ema ki yaka klal shein va'ayin prat klal prat eno beklal elamasha prat, that when you so shein va'ayin ain midyachina lo. Why don't we say that what we have in our verse is a klalu prat? A klalu prat, as we say in the lines of Rabbi Yishmael, we generally which we reference in the lines of Rabbi Yishmael, the rule is that when you have a generality and then specifics, you follow the specifics. And so as a result, we should only allow a slave to go free if they lose an eye or a tooth. No, because in fact, it is not just a klal prat. That you should set him free and send him away. That is a generalization, meaning doesn't say specifically in this case. So as a result, we're going to say that is a generalization. And so klal pratu klal iyatadan elakena prat. And so as a result, it is a general rule followed by a specific rule followed by a general rule. And then when you ever have a general followed by a specific rule followed by a general rule, we apply a general rule with the limitations of the specifics. So we apply the specifics more broadly. So and kal prat kal iyatan dan elakena prat. So maha prat meforish shabagali ve'ein chosrin. So just as the specific items, an eye and a tooth, are things that if they are destroyed, they're obvious. They cause an obvious blemish in the person, and they do not return. So to anything else that's like that. But 1 second. Well, 1 second. Eyes and teeth also accomplish something. They do work for the body. So maybe we should say that it's got to be that the limb that you lose has to be important enough that it affects your ability to do some bodily function. it's got to be something else that where you can't do it. So take a look in Batal Malachto. Ha'ayin nesemes, right? The eye, if you lose the eye, you're blind. Miraos, from seeing. V'ashen milom, and if you lose the tooth, you can't chew. So maybe it's got to be something like that. But alama tanya, but we've got a brisa that seems to say the opposite, because talash bezikano the deal de bo etzem. If you grab a slave's beard and you pull, presumably pretty hard, and now you've dislocated some jawbone that has caused the person to lose that bone, which eventually, withers and does not regenerate. Eved yotze behen lecherus, a slave goes free, even though the implication here, yotze bo lecherus, im etzem she'eno chozer, that we're talking about with a bone that does not return, and we're talking about where in the end it becomes dried up, the lipol, and falls off. Even though in this context you're not able to, there's no work that you are less able to do. It doesn't do anything we're assuming. So kaven de begalihu, but it is obvious. It is a revealed limb. The eno chozer, but it doesn't regenerate. So ahare ke'esrim va'arba rashi avarim, and so it's just like the other 24 limb ends, and we're going to say that it causes somebody to go free. So if it were just a klal u'pradu klal, we would have a problem. So the Gemara answers l'chavshi yishachena ribuyahu. No. We actually have, it's not a klal u'pradu klal, but it's a klal u'pradu klal, where the final klal is something more general. It's an amplification. It's an expansion. And so as a result, we are supposed to expand and not be as limited. And so v'irubuyahu afilu hiko al yado b'tzamsa v'sofa lachzor nami. Well, one second. In that case, why are you choosing this aspect of it to say that it's going to be expanded? Maybe if you hit somebody in the hand and the hand withers, and then it will get back to health, why not say that slave should also go free? Well, alama tanya, well, that's why it says hiko al yado b'tzamsa v'sofa lachzor, that if in fact you hit somebody on the hand and it withers, but it's going to again eventually get better, ain't eved yotze bo lecherus. So we know the slave does not go free. So we can't. So that's not true. So how do we know which one to do? So im kain shein va'ayin my ahanile. So if we were to try and expand in that way, well, then the tooth and the eye wouldn't really be teaching us any kind of limitation. And so as a result, we're going to apply the tooth and the eye and say it's got to be something that does not regenerate. It's got to be something that is visible, and but it doesn't have to be anything more than that. Okay, so now that we've dealt with that, so again, in Tosos, we mentioned how our Mishnah must follow an opinion that says that that the reason our Mishnah doesn't mention shein va'ayin, a tooth or an eye, as a method of a slave going free is because even in such a case, he would require, the author of our Mishnah would require a document. So let's take a look and see. So Tana Rabbanan, B'chulam Eved Yotze Bahem Lecherus. In all of these cases, namely a tooth, an eye, or one of the limbs, a slave goes free. V'tzarach get shechor. But he does require a bill of emancipation, a document that emancipates him. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, that's what Rabbi Shimon says. Rabbi Meir Omer, ain't a tzarach. Rabbi Meir says, no, he does not. He just goes free. Rabbi Yezer Omer, tzarach. Rabbi Yezer says, yes, you do need it. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, ain't a tzarach. Rabbi Akiva Omer, here's Rabbi Akiva, Omer tzarach. Rabbi Akiva says, you do need it. Hamachurin lefnei chachamim omrim, that those who were trying to decide between the two opinions, they said, Nirin divrei Rabbi Tarfon b'shein va'ayin shatorah zachsalo. It seems like when it comes to a Rabbi Tarfon, or when it comes to the shein and ayin, when it comes to the tooth and the eye, it makes more sense, given the fact that the Torah itself says the slave goes free. You shouldn't need a document. the divrei Rabbi Akiva b'shar avarim. But when it comes to other kinds of limbs, the limbs that we learn out from the Torah, well then, hoel ukanas chachamhu. It makes sense to follow Rabbi Akiva and say you do need a get shechrur because these are penalties imposed upon by the rabbis. 1 second, kanasu, you're telling me it's a penalty? Kurai kadarshinan. We just spent a few minutes talking about how we learn this out from a klal uprat uklal. So how can you tell me that it's a rabbinic thing? It's not. So Ella Howil umidrash kachamimhu. No. It's something that is it is derived by the chachamim, and so as a result, that's what we're talking about. So what in the world does that mean? Howil midrash kachamim. So Tosos helps us out here. So take a look in Tosos. So Howil umidrash kachamim perish mishum hachi. So this is explaining why when it comes to other kinds of limbs, we're going to need a get shechor, meaning that when it comes to the 24 types of limbs that are not the eye and the tooth, you're going to need a get shechor. Beim tomer umabakach howel umidrash chachamimhu v'hala kama gufei Torah tuluyin she'ein ban elamakach drasha. How can you possibly tell me that that in this situation we are biblically requiring a get shechror when the Torah when we are learning something out from a drasha? There are lots of mitzvot that we learn from a drasha. So how can that affect the nature of the underlying situation? So l'chein nira l'Rabbeinu Tam to get ze enu elamid rabbanan. So as a result, what the Rabbeinu Tam understands is that really this is talking about a rabbinic get, a rabbinic decree, a rabbinic required get. But we're worried that the owner will find the slave in the marketplace, but Yomer Lo, and will say to him, Avdai ata, you're my slave. Lafisha ein hamidrash yadua, because people don't know that if you lose this, if you lose one of these 24 extremities, that in fact the slave goes free. Lo yadua laolam. Lakach tiknu get shechor, and so as a result, the rabbis established a get shechor. Okay, now the Riva offers a second answer to this question. The Riva parish devadei shein va'ayin diksiv behedya bikra va'alayu ksiv b'chavshi yishalchenu demashmet chavshi meikara ubaha pshita le delo gamar shiluach meisha meisha. That we're going to see in a moment that Rabbi Shimon, who is going to explain why he requires a bill of emancipation, why he requires a get shechor, he's going to cite a particular gzeira shava. And so what, according to the Riva, that gzeira shava is the basis for us saying that in fact a get shechor is required biblically in the context of one of these other extremities. So the chain ain't sarach get shechor, and therefore you don't require get shechor with respect to the mouth, the eye, and the tooth. Aval sharavar, when it comes to other kinds of limbs, the lo nafki elam yisora diyashalchenu v'adei b'hachi gamiri shiluch me'isha v'lakach tzarich lehu get shechor. And so, but for other things, then we would apply this gzeira shava. So my time, and so now let's go in and we'll see this gzeira shava inside. So my time of the Rabbi Shimon. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon? Yalav shiluch me'isha. He says again, Rabbi Shimon's the one who says that you do need a get shechor. He says it because we learn shiluach from isha, just as the word shiluach appears in Dvarim Perek Kavdalet Pasuk Aleph regarding divorce. It also appears in Shmo Perek Kav Aleph Pasuk Kav Zayin in the psukim that talk about freeing a slavery after the loss of a tooth. So we learn one situation from the other. Ma'isha b'shtar, av eved nami b'shtar. So both of them have to happen with a contract. The Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir says, that Rabbi Meir says, no, if in fact it would have said in the pasuk where that refers to shiluach, if it would have referred to chafshi after the shiluach, well then fine. But hashta dekasav l'chafshi yishalachenu, it refers to the freedom prior to the sending away. So so the bottom line is that you are free from the get-go. And so as a result, that is Rabbi Meir's approach, and as a result, you don't need any kind of get shechur at all if you knock something out or cause the slave to lose a limb. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. So next piece. So hiko al eino v'sima. What happens? Gemara is going to quote another brisa that discusses damaging a slave indirectly and whether that results in the slave's freedom. And to spoil the surprise, it will not allow the slave to go free. So if the person strikes the slave himself on the eye, hiko aleno v'sima, and cause him to be blind, o alazno v'charsha, or on his ear, and you cause him to become deaf, eved yotze behein lecheres, then the slave goes free. Negedeno be'eno roeh. If, on the other hand, you hit opposite the eye, and by opposite the eye, it does not mean somewhere on the body opposite the eye, but rather you clap your hands right in front of him, or some other way you cause a shock to his system. Keneged azno be'eno shomea, and he no longer sees, or against opposite his ear, and he no longer hears. Ein eved yotze behen lecheres. He does not go free. So Amar Rav Shemen Rav Ashi l'meimra dekalalav klum. Who? 1 second. That seems to suggest that making a big noise and causing damage doesn't have any significance. But we've got a brisa that seems to suggest otherwise, that making a big noise and causing damage does cause the person who owns the thing that caused the noise to pay. But Tani Rami Bar Yecheskel, Tarnagol Shahoshit Roshola Avir Klizuchis, if a rooster puts its head into a glass container, Vitakabo Ushvaro, and he calls out and he breaks it, Mishalim Nezek Shalim, the owner has to pay full damages. Now, this actually touches on a debate that we will see, God willing, in Baba Kama. The debate is between Sumchus and the rabbis. Sumchus says that if an animal kicks up a pebble and that pebble does damage, if it kicks up the pebble, then that pebble, you have to pay, Sumchus says you have to pay full damages for the damage done. Whereas the rabbis say, no, look, the animal didn't actually touch the item that was broken. It was an indirect. The animal kicked up the pebble. The pebble broke the item. So we're only going to say that there are half damages. So here in this price is according to Sumchus, and he says that there are full damages. And Ba'amar Rav Yosef Amri Bey Rav, and the Rav Yosef said that they said in the name in the yeshiva, Sush Sanaf V'Chamar Shinar. If you've got a horse that is neighing, or a donkey that is braying, V'Shavru Kalim B'Soch Habayis, and they break something as a result, Mishalmin Chatzi Nezek, then they pay half damages. That, of course, is consistent with the rabbi's viewpoint. So Amar Lei, so we see in that situation where their animals are making the noise, that there is damages that are liable. So how could you say that when you make a big clap in front of a slave and cause damage to the slave, that you don't have to, there is no ramifications? So Amar Lei, shiny Adam, a person is different. The Kavan Devar Dasu, there's some kind of a sense of responsibility. You are responsible for how you react to a surprise and to being shot. And so as a result, even because it's not a direct effect, we're not going to make you liable. We'll make the master liable. Kedatanya, as we see, hamavid eskaveru, if you scare your friend, now you're still liable. Hashem knows what you did and what you caused, but you're not liable for in the court of law to pay damages. So Ketzad, what's the situation? Taka ba'azno v'chersho, if you either blow in or yell in to somebody's ear and you cause him to become deaf, putter. That alone is not going to make you liable. However, achazahu v'taka ba'azno karsho chayev. But if you grab him and don't let him move away, so now he is stuck there, well, then you will be chayev. Okay, so now one last little piece, and then with that, we will be done for today. So, Tana Rabbanan, we have two brises. Iko al eno b'chasa. If you strike a slave on his eye and he became weak, va'al sheno v'nadada, or on his tooth and it became loose. Im yachal lahashtamish bahen akshav, if he can still use those limbs, ein eved yotzim behen l'cheres. He's not going to go free. V'im lav, but if his eye became sufficiently weak or his tooth became sufficiently loose that he's not able to use it any longer, eved yotzim behen l'cheres, the slave goes free. And Tanya Edach, we have another brisa. Hareisha haisa eno kuhuya v'sima. If his eye was weak and now you blinded him, shino nududa v'hipila, or the teeth was loose and he knocked it out. If when it was still there, the eye or the tooth, it was still usable, eved yotze behen l'cheres. Well, then knocking it out or causing him to become blind is sufficiently bad that we're going to say that the slave goes free. But if he already wasn't able to use that tooth and wasn't able to use that eye, then he's not going to go free. Utsrika, and we need to teach both of these brises. If you taught just the first brisa that told us that if you do damage, even if the eye is left or even if the tooth is left inside, as long as it's no longer usable, we're going to let the slave go free. Well, that's because everything was wonderful at the start. But but if you tell me in the second situation where he starts with weak vision, then he goes free because now he has poor vision. So aval hacha. But in the second brisa, where he was originally had poor vision, amalo, maybe that's not going to allow the slave to go free, and therefore we need to also teach the second brisa. And if we only taught the second brisa about going from a weak eye to being blind, mishum desamya legamre, but that's because he became unable to use the item completely. Aval hasam delo samya legamre, it's not absolute and total. Amalo, maybe not, because the eye is still there, it's just very weak, and the tooth is still there, it's just very loose. So tzricha, therefore we need to teach both of these brises. So you may be wondering, well, what happens if you're trying to help the slave and you end up knocking out the slave's tooth or the slave's eye, and causing him to become blind? That will be the first brisa that we will, God willing, discuss tomorrow. So stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. All right, I'll tell you in a moment. Hold on, we'll go over everything in a second. Have a great day, everybody.